truth is about change. It's the ego transcending. Humans need pain and suffering in order to be propelled to the divine.
Love and light without the wholeness of truth is just a mask.
There's nothing wrong with women being in the home, but women like me, we don't want that. We want to go out and talk about truth.
That wisdom, that nurturing, that care.
That is the nice part of the divine feminine.
Welcome back to the podcast, Ashley. It's been incredible to see your journey as it's Pythian Priestess, right? I know you've done a ton since our last conversation for the new listeners. And if they haven't, they need to go back. And it's one of our most famous podcasts that we have out there. So it'll be in the top of the podcast on HDL. I know you've taken on the mantle of Pythian Priestess and you've created the Pythian Mystery School, especially in a time when you feel the sacred and divine are being diluted. And we're going to get into that. But what do you feel is your calling right now? What are you really focused on?
Well, that's very funny that you asked that question because that's what I spent a lot of time last night thinking about. And that is stepping into the warrior archetype as a woman, because there's a lot of rage right now in our society, particularly in America and amongst women. And the warrior, I think we often think of as the one who holds the blade, the one who cuts down or takes life. And in this case, that is not what I am doing. It is a warrior for truth. So warrior for the sacred and to defend the mysteries. And I actually spent a lot of time looking at my birth chart, and I have Saturn and Mars both in my 6th house, which is of service. And those are pretty heavy planets that embody that warrior archetype.
Do you feel I know, because you spoke about this, and a lot of what we're taking is just one Instagram post. So I encourage people to follow you, and we'll have that in the show notes. I mean, because we both were on sync, because you sent something to me and I'd already screenshotted it and put it in my Gmail of what I want to talk about. And it was a carousel, Instagram carousel. And in one of these recent posts, something that you spoke about, I think that was incredibly powerful. And what you're talking about now is the sacred rage and the fierce, the whole nature of the divine feminine. And I know you've also grown your offerings with the Pythian Mystery School and your podcast, The Occult Unveiled, which I encourage people to follow, in these ritual guides. What's been the most transformative part of your work recently, especially as you navigate these challenges? And maybe you can even go into the sacred rage and the furious.
Yeah. So diving into my personal work, I've spent the last several months, probably the last 4 to 5 months after the LA fires, thinking about where did I want to take my life and what direction do I want to go in? And I want to see the spiritual have spirit back in it. I'm watching it get diluted and branded before my eyes. I'm watching it become an ATM for people. It's lost its meaning, and it's a tool that should be used. It's not a hobby. It's not a collecting item. And that rage of watching the thing that is most important to me that I've dedicated my life to become commodified is painful. And my soul is in grief over it.
And I think a lot of people, and it's always interesting because I watched your post during the LA fires and then how you were having to go from place to place. And then, you were showing, you could visibly see the fires. And then the amount of people that were displaced and everything that goes on. And I don't want to get into politics at all with this, but I feel with something like that, why would we not be, when innocence is lost, why would we not have that, and then here, let me give you a crystal, or here, let me give you an affirmation. That doesn't work when you've lost your home and everything.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't help you when you're displaced.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, what's happening is there's avoidance, there's projection, there's spiritual bypassing. And I sat down and I really looked at it and said, what is the problem? Where is the disconnect here?
Mm-hmm.
And I found an amazing book called Dancing in the Flames by Woodman and Dickinson, 2 female Jungian psychoanalysts that go through and explain what the dark goddess is and why her lack of presence in our modern society is incredibly damaging.
So let's go more into that. As far as, 'Cause I wanna go more into this book and maybe we can put links to it. Is it available on Amazon?
It sure is. It's on Amazon. You can find it on eBay. And if you look, it's also on the Internet Archive for free. You can borrow it.
What do you feel like if you could speak to women now? Like, I know the rage is out there. How do you like from a feminine aspect, how do you take up a sword? What are your thoughts on that?
So, the first thing, if you want to take up with sword and be a warrior, you have to be ready to be disliked. You have to be ready to go against the patriarchy and understand that we've lived in a society for at least 2,000 years that has been dominated by the masculine, and there's an imbalance in that. So, you're not supposed to hate men. That's not the point. The point is to be able to live equally together. And that doesn't mean we're exactly the same, but it means that we have to let certain ideas and trends die. And right now, our world is clawing to try to keep women in the home. And there's nothing wrong with women being in the home, but women like me, we don't want that. We want to go out and talk about truth, and truth is about change. It's the ego transcending and also finding respect for the earth, mother earth, right? We talk about this mother, and we've neglected her so much, and she's raging right now. It's so frustrating to see the way that the goddess has been cloistered in modern times to being just a soft, delicate, feminine sex object.
Mhm. No, I agree 100%, and it's almost kind of gone down to, "I'm gonna go do yoga. I've got some crystals in my home. I'm going to have this, like, let's be love and light." That's kind of what it's gone down to. It's to the point of where and if you really look at I've read a lot of books on feminine energy and back, especially when you get into ancient times, like, they ruled.
Yeah,
Like, the feminine energy ruled, like, that's what gave birth. I mean, over and over and over, you see even the form of, like, the dilution of Mary,
yes,
like,
yes.
she was a goddess, and she's the one that gave birth to if you believe in the story, she's the one that gave birth to Jesus, in this and there was, like, over and over, you can see through the ancient, not just scriptures, but in other even they found, like, ancient scrolls in India and these areas where there was immaculate conception that were given by goddesses into these other gods. And it's this whole
Mhm.
idea of the feminine energy being that wisdom, that nurturing, that care. And an old guy, this is funny, but an old guy was of no use. But like in a tribe back in the day, like if you're old, you can't hunt anymore. There's nothing you do. But all the wisdom came from the grandmothers. They were the ones that, were leading the tribes. When we look at this divine feminine wisdom being mocked, diluted, like you said, even used for this masculine human greed and gain, what practices? I know we can get into the groves, and I know you've done that, and you can do the dancing among the trees, that's, like, super powerful, but, like, the sacred feminine, if you could describe that in a more of a modern woman, what would that look like?
So, it's about wholeness. This is easily conceptualized as mother, maid, and crone, right? And the sacred rage is the crone energy coming to light. So what happens here? I'm not going to talk about mother maiden right now. We're really going to focus on crone. This is a woman who has stories. She's the one who's lived existence. She holds the wisdom. She has stripped away her mask, even her role in society. All those false identities have fallen away. And you see this throughout all the cultures. We see it in Kali, Baba Yaga. We see it in Isis, in Mesopotamia with Erishkigal and Inanna. And I'm going to psychologize this here. And this is about the part of ourselves, our ego,
Mhm.
that is being masked. This is our unconscious. This is where our grief, where our rage, the parts of us that feel unloved and unworthy hide. And the dark goddesses are there to bring truth, to bring light. Now, light in this case is not this sweet, like, oh, love and light. No, light is blinding.
Yes.
Light hurts. And then lastly, it's about breaking through illusion. Working with a dark goddess is a type of what I call from the book a womb tomb. It's a space between life and death where you are being dismembered and rebuilt at the same time.
Yeah, and I know you talked about in the post the contrasting the love, light, and peace that we all talk about, love and light, all that with the ancient Greek concept that thumos, the spirited fire of the soul. And so one thing that you're talking about is how it defends truth and honor. And when we think of truth and honor, we think automatically most people think masculine. If you really want to be
Yeah.
honest,
Ooh.
what is this ancient Greek concept of thumos?
Okay. So, first of all, I want to address honor and justice real quick. We're going to talk about Ma'at. So, Ma'at was the goddess in the afterlife who would weigh the heart versus the feather. And if your heart was not equal to the feather, if it was heavier, you would then be devoured by another, like an alligator ancient god. Ma'at is not just a goddess, she is a universal principle. And this is about living in truth. Okay. And I'm going to bring out my notes because I've been thinking about this for years and trying to
No, go ahead. Yeah.
the ancient Greek philosophers. I'm going to focus specifically today on Socrates and Plato. And truth is a virtue that's built on 4 pillars. That is wisdom, knowing what is real, justice, living in a right relationship, which means between the spiritual world and the material world. It's courage, learning to stand and act using your voice, the soul fire to bring truth or justice. They all kind of intertwine eventually. And then lastly, temperance, which is discipline ultimately to stay and live in integrity. That's self-restraint, that's self-governance, not allowing yourself to swing to the extremes, but to find stability in your life.
No, I love that. And one of the things that you talk about is embracing this thumos, and I want you to kind of talk to women being spiritual leaders.
Yeah.
Because, it's so interesting. I was talking, and I say this all the time. I was like, I'll tell people, men or women, I'll be like, name spiritual leaders. How many masculine names do they come up with? Jesus, I mean, over and over and over again, it's all masculine. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, why isn't there any feminine spiritual leaders? And you talked about this role as a spiritual leader. What does it mean to you to embody this righteous anger?
Mm.
Especially in a world that tells women to be quiet, rise above, all of those things.
Yeah, so that inspiration and that post in particular came from a real conversation where I knew that I was speaking to a man who was not going to listen to me, and I was like, "I'm gonna just shut up and go write about this." So, the best way for me to explain what thumos is to take a look at the Chariot card from the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck. So for those of you who are listening to this podcast and can't see it, I'll describe the card for you. There are 2 sphinxes. There's a black sphinx and a white sphinx, and in between them, there is a man who is going on a chariot covered with stars. So the stars are above him, the moon is on his shoulders, and there's a spinning top, interestingly, between the 2 sphinxes. This card is a representation of the allegory by Plato called the Chariot. And this represents the 3 parts of the soul. So there are the appetites, which is the dark horse. This is the animal soul, the soul that wants to eat, sleep, and have sex. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of our nature. Then there are the higher aspirations of the soul, which is reason, nous. That's the middle character here. And then there is the white sphinx, which represents the masculine or the logical side. The ancient Greeks would call this the Apollonian versus the Dionysian is a great example of that. So thumos is what happens when your soul sees the imbalance in these sphinxes and it wants to correct it. This righteous anger. I personally have felt this anger for over a decade, maybe a little bit longer than that. And this was about watching truth with a capital T and those 4 pillars we talked about become bastardized, become diluted, seeing people stop thinking for themselves and following nothing but trends just because they're afraid of being disliked. And that thumos for me really, it's the passion and the fire in my soul to bring back the sacred into the world.
Yeah, I love that. And in other posts, you invoke the Black Isis and the Black Madonna. And this is like super cool. I want to get into this. And you described her as forged through the fires of chaos and suffering, which we don't like to talk about. We don't like chaos. We don't like suffering. But, and I loved how you say forged through the fire because that's such a descriptive narrative. But it's a figure of endurance, resilience, fierce love, not just a mother, but rooted in the body and sexuality and nature and the wild rhythms of life. What do these archetypes mean to you personally? Like the Black Isis and Black Madonna, and what has inspired you with them?
Sure. So I am also going to pull up my notes on this. So
No, no, perfect. Yeah.
So the three goddesses that I really look to when I am talking about like the dark energy, the first one is Isis. So Isis being the black Isis has a couple of different meanings. So obviously the first one is she comes from Africa. So there is the black skin, black also representing fertile, which is what Egypt was not called Egypt. It was called Kemet, meaning fertile black soil. But deeper than that, Isis's mysteries are of pleasure and pain. And you need pain. Humans need pain and suffering in order to be propelled to the divine. It sucks. It's just the way that it is. If we all lived in perfect, happy harmony, there would be no need for transformation. We would just be in a state of hopefully balance and equilibrium, right? So for Isis, one of the stories that she has is the mourning Isis. After Osiris was murdered by her brother Set, he chopped up his body into 14 pieces and scattered them throughout the land. And Isis goes and she collects all of these pieces. How gruesome. How
Mhm.
terrible. And she puts him back together, Osiris, except he's missing his phallus. So she fashions a golden phallus. He is then risen from the dead, and Horus, the god, is born. So from this allegory, we see these 14 parts represent the missing pieces of us. Part as Buddha tells us, life is suffering. You cannot live in this world trauma free. It's never going to happen. You have to have trauma. You have to have pain. But the point of the journey is to go back and find those missing pieces of yourselves to integrate. So, all of these ancient mysteries are part of what we see in modern psychology, thanks to figures like Carl Jung and Freud. So for me, integrating Isis or the black Isis into my life is accepting suffering as natural and a part of it, accepting the gruesome parts of life and knowing that the resilience and the discipline that I have will get me through it. And also know that those are the fires that you need to be forged in to be a warrior. A warrior needs courage to stand in the face of adversity. A warrior has to stand up even when they're in pain and they don't want to. It's fighting for what is right, what is just.
No, I love that. And I know from our last episode as a teenager and as a kid, and I wanted to ask you this personally, the Black Madonna, and I know there was some Catholic leanings when you were, a kid and stuff. As far as mystic Catholicism goes, because I've been studying it here recently. So it's kind of, I don't know what, you know how it is. You get into one thing and then you go down the rabbit hole. So, and I don't know what, I don't want to label myself or anything, but I do. What's like the Black Madonna to you?
So I guess the best way you could say it is Sophia, which means
Yes.
wisdom. So Sophia and the demiurge, it's not a nice story. It's kind of ugly. I'm not super well versed in so much about the demiurge aspect, but the Black Madonna specifically as wisdom is similar to the crone. And that's when it's the woman who has lived her life, who has come out of the world not in pessimism, and it's not optimism either, it's realism.
Hmm.
That's what life is. Life is one very long battle, and that's hard. But if you lose, if you what did they say like, in the Bible? It's like Pharaoh not hardened, like hardens his
Yeah, he did
heart.
harden his heart. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't let your heart, don't let your love stop because you've had trauma, you've had pain. That is not justice to your soul. Your soul wants to transform. It wants the alchemy. And so the black Isis there, for me personally, it represents like the creator, the creation. Like I believe Isis is all is Isis. She is in everything. So that's part of it. It represents both the womb and the tomb.
No, I love that. I know you've written that the sacred is more than peace. It's fierce, it's wild, it's unapologetically whole. And that love and light without the wholeness of truth is just a mask. And I love that. That's so freaking good. How do you help your students at the Pythian Mystery School embrace this? Maybe you have, let's say you have, students that come in there with a lot of feminine energy. How can they embrace the fears, the whole vision of the divine, especially when they might be conditioned? And especially I see this a lot nowadays where it's kind of like, "Oh, I'm spiritual, so I'm sweet and peaceful." How do you get people to embrace that fierce and wildness and the wholeness of.
Well, the first thing we have to remember is that the sacred feminine is both light and shadow.
Mhm.
I have a lot of I am not a therapist, but I have a lot of psychology in Pythian Mystery School, and we talk about dreams a lot because dreams are the gateway to the unconscious mind, and that is where the dark goddess lives. She's the mother, the destroyer, the wise one. She is wisdom and mystery, and she speaks in symbols. So I ask, and I do this also on my Instagram. I have like my close friends broadcast channel where I ask people like, what are you dreaming about? And you'll see because in people's minds, we see the patriarchal rationalism has created certain barriers. And so the story of the goddess has been squished and she can only come out at night. And so people who have nightmares, I used to have really terrible nightmares because I was not giving honor to the emotional depth and the pain I was feeling. So I'll share a very personal story with you. When I was 15 years old, I had this dream where I went into the garage and I saw all of my family members dismembered, hanging like a Saw movie. And it was flashing red and white and black. And I was horrified. How terrible. What a horrible dream. I must be a really bad person. Well, after years of therapy and dating a therapist, that was the expression of my unconscious rage. I was not being heard. I was being devoured by a mother who couldn't love me the way I needed to be loved at that time. And that was my unconscious's mind trying to let out that rage. It's a deep psychological process. You can't just shove away and be so sweet and innocent and cute. That is the nice part of the divine feminine that men like to look at because it's not scary.
No, thank you for sharing that because I have a really close friend and she has the same dream. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, that is why.
She has it every Christmas Eve.
Well, that's
And
a
that's the
beauty.
same thing. It's like the family's getting together, and then it's like, "What's wrong with me? Why am I having such a horrific dream?"
It's
But
because
it's
you
the
have
same thing. The mom wasn't loved. Same exact story. Isn't that
yeah.
wild?
Yeah, the unconscious, right? We're all connected by the collective unconscious. And that's really crazy that she has that same dream. Her unexpressed rage. And if we're going to get real dark here, like Freud would say, like the murder impulse.
Mhm.
And that's in everybody.
It's
Nobody
in
is
it's in
exempt from
everybody.
that. Yeah,
Mm.
nobody's exempt. If you are a human being, that lives in you.
You've heard of that study where they took people and they put them where they had to shock somebody? I don't know if you've
Yes.
heard that or not, and then they believed that it was real, and they had an actor in that room. I think it was at Stanford University. I'm not sure.
Yes, it was. Yeah, I'm familiar.
Yeah, and so but for everybody that knows this real quick, so basically, they had an actor in there, and he would be screaming as they were shocking him, but they would put pressure on people, just normal people, and they would be like, "You and I or whoever," and they'd be like, "Well, you need to shock him again. Please shock him again." And they would shock him, and then the person would be so shocked, like they passed out, like there would be nothing, and they'd be like, "You need to shock him again. We're gonna raise
Um,
the voltage." And they thought, well, only the whole idea of the study was, like, only, like, 1 or 2%, maybe 5% of people would do it, and they thought those would be the people that would be really sadistic, maybe, like, ultra narcissistic, the rage impulse in 'em, that murder impulse. No, I think it was, like, 60 or 70% of the people did it anyways.
Yeah, yeah, and that's very interesting, right? Because we see that in like, they take the responsibility and they put it on to the administrator, not themselves, even though they're the ones who are pushing the button.
Oh, we could go so many ways with that. That's so good. Because I don't care if you're right or left wing, it doesn't matter. It's not the responsibility of the government to handle, who you are as a person. Yeah, obviously we can have, persecution and different things that happen in our lives. And we've seen that over and over again. I mean, Jesus is a perfect example of that. He came into a system where, you know,
Yeah.
from all different angles, people were persecuting, and he said, turn the other cheek. And a lot of people don't understand what that means, and this is exactly what you're talking about. Love in its fiercest form. And
Yes.
you wrote that and like when you think of not just divine feminine, but what is love in its fiercest form? What do you think about that? Is it speaking truth, even if it's unpopular? Like for you, what is love in its fiercest form?
Well, the first thing my mind goes to is Kali, the goddess of Hinduism. She who is holding the severed head of the ego, who is drinking the blood, she who is transformation and chaos. That is for me personally like what I think of. And it's truly death and rebirth. It is being able to first of all, women's bodies, when we talk about the dark goddess, like women have this beautiful gift of being able to create. So fertility, menstruation, to be able to create matter itself is very beautiful. And it cannot be controlled by men as much as we're trying to right now in this age. I'm sorry, I just lost the thread. What was the
No, no,
question?
no, no, this is perfect because I wanna be super practical, and I know you have a mystery school, so I know we can't
Mhm,
get too involved in all this with rituals and stuff like that, but
mhm.
how can someone maybe tonight, they're listening to this podcast and there's a woman out there and she wants to integrate this fierce feminine divine. What are some
Mhm.
rituals and offerings that she can start kind of, to experience this wholeness or this healing? What are good things that she can do as far as rituals and offerings?
Okay, so this is intense, right? This is something that integration takes a lifetime. This is not something you're going to do in 2 months or 2 years or 2 decades, a lifetime. The first thing I would recommend doing is going into a room with a large mirror. You want to light some incense because incense is an olfactory, it activates the olfactory senses and puts you into a certain mindset. And I want you to get a candle. I don't care what color, I don't care how large, and I want you to hold it under your chin, turn off all the lights and look into the mirror. This is so painful for most people to look straight into their eyes for 30 seconds because you are going to be looking into the windows of your soul. You will be able to see through the illusion, the mask you put on. You're going to see true emotion. You might see anger, you might see hate, you might see fear. But whatever you're seeing is going beyond the mask. So that's step 1, and that's the easiest one. Step 2, I would say, is making contact with that hurt version of ourselves because remember the dark goddess is putting a spotlight on the parts of ourselves that we have repressed and the parts of ourselves we're afraid of. And this is where we get into Kali's domain, right? Where we have to speak and act with courage and to go through the fires. So something you can do is you can get it's called a scrying bowl. You can make one out of ceramic if you want and paint it black. You can buy a black bowl, whatever you need. It just needs to be dark. And then you want to fill it with water. Ideally, you want to fill it with some kind of ocean water or spring water. But you know what? If you only have tap water, that's fine too. Then you are going to take a tea light and you're going to set it on fire and put it to the side. Then you're going to do an invocation. Now, an invocation is when you're bringing the energy of the goddess into your body. So be smart because it will affect you. It's going to affect your personality temporarily. I will tell you that there are times where I've been on set with like Sam and Colby and other YouTubers, and I've invoked the goddess, and it's suddenly like just truth is spilling out, and I'm like, oh, damn, Ashley, you gotta like watch your tongue here, right? Because there's no filter anymore. So there are lots of invocations you can find online, but I recommend that like you're ready for this. Probably the easiest one is invoking the Black Isis or the Dark Isis. I actually wrote an invocation. It's on my Instagram page. You can go find it. So once you do that, you got to turn off all the lights again. And you're going to look into the waters of the bowl. This represents your unconscious mind. And you want to make an intention. Show me the unhealed parts of myself. Show me, uncover to me the skeletons that I don't see, whatever it is. You're going to take the light, the tea light. There's a couple of ways you can do this. For some people, just staring into the water isn't enough. They want to put the wax of the candle into the water. That's great. You can put the candle on top and float in the water so you have a little bit of extra light, whatever works for you. And then once you have that truth that comes up to you, you've got to do something with it. You can't just be like, look at it and be like, okay, cool. That's fucked up. All right. You have to say, what can I do to heal this? That might look like inner child healing. That might look like I've got PTSD from something and I need to go to therapy. Flighty takes us really far, but we also need to look at it at a psychological level. We need compassion for ourselves, forgiveness for ourselves, and have the courage and the wisdom to do those things.
Yeah, and I know you've done a lot of this and you have, and that's why I encourage people to look at your mystery school, but there's a lot of women out there that have been hurt, whether it's physically hurt, and I know you've dealt with a lot of that and helped women heal from that. And I know you've studied, Jung a ton, integrating the shadow.
Mhm.
I know you're kind of evoking that with this ritual. But a lot of people don't wanna look at their shadow. They wanna do the love and light. Let's just stay focus on affirmations. If we look at the dark side of things, I mean, there's even spiritual teachings like that. Like, don't look at any of that. Just stay positive, positive, positive. How do you teach people to embrace their own shadows and then finding their voice, especially when it comes to women wanting to conform or whatever it may be, but how do you teach people to embrace their shadow?
Well, first of all, the first thing when it comes to looking at your shadow is recognizing it's not your enemy. It's a part of you.
That's good, yes.
The second thing, which took me about a year of therapy to really understand. If people are curious, I did hypnosis therapy for 6 years. We have a tendency to see emotions as good or bad. And that's why it really pisses me off when I see these charts of like low vibrational energies and high vibrational energies. And it's like, okay, that's true. But with your black and white thinking, those energies, you're pushing them away and
Mhm.
you're making your shadow bigger. Don't be afraid of the rage, the jealousy, the selfishness. No, you're not gonna, when I say embrace it, you're not being like, oh, it's okay to do these things. It's recognizing that those are coming from a place of hurt.
Yeah, but I
So,
think it's more than that. I don't wanna interrupt you because I wanna stay right here and then we'll go on there. I just was talking to somebody that was like a gang member, lots of violence, fighting all the time. He never had a good mother, never father, foster care, all that. And I said, the shadow side of you, why are you doing so well at work? I was like, you've alchemized some things. We don't realize, and Jung gets into this in the Red Book really, really, specifically, but this whole idea of alchemizing the shadow, turning lead to gold. I think it's so important for people to be understand that if you gain enough self-awareness, you can begin to, like you said, because that's what the therapy is. It's this understanding of self-awareness. You can get into the multi, like you wouldn't be who you are if it wasn't the fucked up shit in you.
absolutely, that's so true. I think what people are having a trouble getting at, right, is saying like you have to be whole. You're not just looking at the shadow and say, okay, here I see it. You have to honor it. It's a part of everything. And that's where a lot of people disagree with me. I see, especially when you look at like the Black Isis, she's the material, she's the earth, she's the soil. So much of spiritual teachings talk about transcendence, and we're not talking about immanence, what's here on the earth. You need black and white. You need yin and yang. You don't get one without the other. And to ignore the other one is to create that big massive shadow that, man, it messes up your nervous system. It causes illness and leaving, unspoken truths or not letting your body move. Like you can't hate yourself. That's a part of every single person. And so by honoring it, welcoming, saying, I see the sacred rage. Now that doesn't mean you're going to go out and kill people. That you're recognizing the impulse. And by recognizing that impulse, you can turn the poison into medicine because the change in the integration is saying, okay, so this is the symptom, right? I have the sacred rage that's it coming from a place of shame. And the way that I did my alignment and healing and creating integrated wholeness was through therapy. In the hypnosis, we worked through 3 different levels of my body: the mental, the emotional, and the physical. So we would go into the unconscious mind and I would find the blocks. And these blocks looked like little factories from the 1900s. They were like puffing out dark smoke. And what I would do is I would go in and I would take the factory, I would put it onto a screen and destroy it. Then I would take the ashes or whatever and I would transform it into something else. Sometimes it was a butterfly or a swan. But even though this is all symbolic and it does take place in the unconscious mind, it's more than just journaling. That's why you've got to dig deep.
No, I love that, and you wouldn't brag, but I'm gonna brag for everybody, like, I mean, you got a ton of followers on TikTok, you've got the Pythian Mystery School with tons of members of Patreon, and so in this mystery school, how do you foster a space where your members can express this righteous anger, or what are some of the things that you do? And like I said, you don't have to give too much away, but what are some of the things you do to integrate their shadows, rather than this love and light narrative?
So we do a lot of meditation. Every ritual that I hold, there's some kind of meditation that you go into yourself and you meet a goddess, a god, a higher power. And when you are communicating that, remember, of course, all gods and goddesses are archetypes living within your minds that represent a higher level of energy. And by interacting with this on such a personal level, they are able to communicate with that part of themselves, and they receive gifts. People have received daggers, swords, lotus flowers. Some people receive keys. And remember, the unconscious always speaks in symbol. So meditation is so important, and it's such a part of spirituality that people think is boring or hard, which is why I created my new podcast called Pause with Pythian. And I'm teaching people and giving them the mode of access completely for free to do these meditations. And you know what? Some of the comments I get, people being like, I was so scared to do this. I saw really horrible things, but I'm glad I did it. I understand more about me now.
What are some of the things like, because I know you kind of play more like, well, it's what people consider the dark or the black or whatever, and you're doing the ghost stuff, with the famous YouTubers and all that. What are some of the things that people, how do you come into this? Should they meditate? Should they be aware? I know they could be in your mystery school and then you have a format for them to go through this. But so many, I think there's a lot of women that have a lot of interest in witchcraft or, the occult, but they're afraid, like you just said.
Mm.
How do you have this, this Isis boldness to come into something like that, to embrace the sacred feminine and the dark side?
So a big part of that is my workings with the goddess Maat. So I talked about her earlier on the podcast. She is the goddess who is not just a goddess, she's also a universal principle. Ma'at is balance and justice and temperance. She is cutting. She's not very emotional. And by invoking her pretty consistently for 6 months, like it helped me create that boldness, finding my voice and saying, okay, like suffering is the key to wisdom. And I have to embrace this suffering. I need to look at it and say, this is sacred too.
No, no. And one of the things that I think a lot of people, whether it's tarot, and I know you're into that. Do you still do readings and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I do.
I want people to be able to get a hold of you with that. But one of the things that I think people, like, off air, you were saying, I'm not afraid of too much anymore, these spirits or demons or whatever, and you've gone through the gamut, I mean, you're young to me because I'm old, but I mean, you're like an old soul and you've done all this, got the t-shirt for a decade or more. Why is there so much fear around this? What do you think it is? Is it just ignorance or people haven't gone
Mm,
through it? Like, why do you
yeah.
think there's so much fear?
Well, people love illusion. People love the stories they tell themselves. And I think it's multiple layers. So at the base layer, of course, it's our society where all these goddesses have been pushed away. Hecate, Kali, Black Madonna, Isis have been pushed aside for more masculine gods. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Jesus. Jesus and I are mad chill. He was a revolutionary brown-skinned man who died for what he believed in. I'm totally down with that. What I'm not down with is the dogma of the church as a form of control.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where I think a lot of this stems from, because this is generational. God forbid I say this, but ancestral problems, right? This has been so programmed in our minds that now, as the dark goddess is rising up in her rage, wielding her sword and holding the head of the severed ego, we're all in fear going, oh my God, I thought that the goddess was supposed to be this sweet thing with her titty out and I suck on it and everything's happy. Okay, that's a part of it, but you're only looking at one aspect. It's got two sides, all right? And if you only focus on loving mother, you're missing out on the other half of life. And one is not better than another. They need each other to exist. The material world would not exist without these lower vibrations. The body that you live in is a low vibration. The desk that I'm sitting at is a low vibration, but that doesn't necessarily mean evil. And that black and white thinking, good versus evil, spiritual warfare stuff that comes from Christianity and other Abrahamic religions is not helpful. Like, yes, there is a spiritual war inside of you. I believe that. But that war can only be won when you put down the fighting tools and you look at that part, that injured, wounded part of yourself, not as your enemy, but a part of you that deserves love and compassion.
That's so good. Ashley, this conversation has been so powerful, and I know it's inspiring for everyone. Our last conversation, we got tens of thousands of views.
Amazing.
Where can our listeners find you if they want to dive deeper into your work? We encourage, everyone to join the Pythian Mystery School. How can they get a booking of a tarot reading? Or if they want to listen to your new podcast, I'm going to download it on my phone right after we get
Amazing.
off. What kind of go through like your links and stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find Mystery School, which is Pythian, that's Pythian, mysteryschool.com. You can book an interview with me. I will help you completely for free figure out where you best fit into the different programs I offer. If you're interested in booking a tarot reading with me, look up Pythian Priestess on Etsy. And you can find me on YouTube, which is where the podcast is currently hosted, as well as a bunch of free classes that I have put out.
Ashley, this conversation has been so powerful and inspiring. Where can our listeners find you if they want to like dive deeper into your work, whether it's joining the Pythian Mystery School? I know you can book a tarot reading or listening to your new podcast, which I'm going to do, right when we get off, or maybe they want to explore some ritual guides. What's the best way? Give me the links and let me know how I can know more of you.
Absolutely. So if you're interested in ritual guides or joining Pythian Mystery School, you'll want to go to Pythian, that's Pythian, mysteryschool.com. You can book a free interview with me where I will help you figure out exactly where you fit into Mystery School. You can find me across social media. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky, all that stuff as Pythian Priestess, and YouTube. I've been really focusing on expanding my YouTube. That's where Pause with Pythian is found. Simply same username. And then lastly, if you're interested in booking a tarot reading with me or looking for spiritual guidance, you can book on Etsy. Just simply type in that word, Pythian Priestess.
That's so awesome. Thank you, Ashley. Appreciate it. Appreciate all the wisdom. And I know you're going to help a lot of people.
Thank you, Jason. This has been so much fun. I really appreciate coming back, and thank you for letting me speak the hard truths. Like, honestly, I was so nervous about this interview because I'm like, oh man, this is going to be so unpopular.
No, I think it'll be the most popular. Thank you, Ashley.